Imagine a city, not just any city, but the glittering capital of the most powerful empire on earth. Picture massive temples reaching for the sky, their walls covered in intricate carvings, telling stories of gods and of pharaohs. Think of bustling markets, grand avenues, royal palaces where kings dripping in gold made decisions that shaped the world. Now, imagine it all just gone, vanished, swallowed by the earth, its memory fading into myth and legend. This isn't a fantasy tale. This is the real story of Tanis, Egypt's lost capital, a place so powerful it was once called the Thebes of the North, and yet so completely forgotten that for centuries people thought it was just a ghost story whispered on the desert wind. So, why Tanis? For most of its history, Egypt's power was centered in the south. Memphis, the legendary Thebes. These were the traditional heartlands, the homes of the pyramid builders, the warrior pharaohs of the New Kingdom. But by the time of the 21st dynasty, around 1070 BCE, the world had changed. The great Egyptian empire was fractured. Power was split between the high priests of Amun in Thebes, the pharaohs ruling from the north. The old capitals were far from the action. The real threats, the real opportunities were now in the Mediterranean. The pharaohs of this new dynasty, men like Smendes I, needed a new capital for a new era. They needed a city that looked outward, not inward. Tanis was the perfect choice. Located on a major branch of the Nile in the northeastern delta, a strategic gateway to the sea, vital trade routes to Asia. From here, a pharaoh could control commerce, launch naval expeditions, keep a watchful eye on potential invaders from the east, the Libyans, the Sea Peoples. Tanis wasn't just a place to live, it was a statement. It was a forward operating base for a dynasty determined to hold Egypt together. To legitimize their new capital and their rule, the pharaohs of Tanis did something incredibly clever and audacious. They decided to essentially move the old southern capitals to their new northern home. They sailed up the Nile to Pi-Ramesses, the former capital of Ramesses the Great, and systematically took it apart. They hauled hundreds of massive obelisks, colossal statues, sphinxes downriver, and re-erected them in Tanis. It was the ultimate ancient recycling project. This act was more than just practical, it was powerful propaganda. By surrounding themselves with the monuments of legendary pharaohs like Ramesses the Great, the rulers of Tanis were wrapping themselves in the glory of the past. They were declaring to the world, "We are the true heirs of Egypt's golden age. The power of Thebes, the legacy of Ramesses, it all lives here now, in Tanis." The city became a patchwork of history, a living museum of Egypt's past glories, all repurposed to secure its future. It was a bold move, and for a while it worked, making Tanis the undeniable center of the Egyptian universe. For over 400 years, Tanis was the beating heart of a civilization that had already existed for millennia, but the very ground it was built on would become its undoing, a silent, creeping enemy that would eventually entomb the entire city. What happened to Tanis? It wasn't destroyed by a great war or a cataclysmic earthquake in a single day. Instead, it suffered a slow, quiet death. The branch of the Nile River that gave it life, that filled its canals and irrigated its fields, began to silt up and change its course. The once vibrant harbor became a muddy marsh. Slowly, relentlessly, the desert sands and the river's silt crept in, burying temples, burying tombs, burying palaces layer by layer. The city was abandoned. Its great stones scavenged for other buildings. Its location became a puzzle, a riddle lost to time, waiting for someone to look past the myths and rediscover the truth buried beneath. And that's where our story really begins. It's a story of adventure, of a dogged archaeologist who refused to give up, and of a discovery so monumental it should have shaken the world. It's a tale of silver pharaohs, hidden tombs, and a city of secrets that is still giving up its mysteries today. We're peeling back the layers of sand and time to walk the streets of this phantom capital. Forget what you think you know about ancient Egypt, about pyramids and Tutankhamun. We're heading into the deep, murky delta to a place that history forgot, a place called Tanis. The expedition is just getting started. For nearly 2,000 years, Tanis remained a ghost. Its location was confused with other biblical and historical sites, and its true identity was lost. The site itself, known to locals as San El Hagar, was a confusing jumble of broken stone and sand dunes. Archaeologists had poked around there for decades, but the sheer scale of the destruction and the thick layers of silt made it a nightmare to excavate. Many believed there was nothing of importance left to find. They were looking for the legendary city of Pi-Ramesses, and this messy, waterlogged site just didn't seem grand enough. All that was about to change thanks to one man, a French archaeologist named Pierre Montet. Montet was convinced that San El Hagar was a site of major importance, even if he wasn't sure exactly which city it was. He began digging there in the 1920s, but it was grueling, frustrating work. The site was low-lying and prone to flooding, turning his excavation pits into muddy pools of water. He spent years meticulously clearing sand, documenting broken statues and inscriptions, piecing together a puzzle that nobody else could see. While the world was still buzzing from Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in the 1920s, Montet was working in relative obscurity, chasing a hunch in the mosquito-infested delta. The breakthrough came in 1939. As the world teetered on the brink of World War II, Montet and his team were digging near the ruins of the Great Temple. They uncovered a series of undisturbed underground chambers. At first, they seemed to be part of the temple's foundation, but as they cleared the entrance to one, they found a stone block sealing a doorway. They had stumbled upon something unbelievable, an intact royal necropolis. Montet had made a discovery that rivaled that of King Tut's tomb, but the news was completely overshadowed by the impending war. When Montet's team finally broke through into the first tomb, that of Pharaoh Asorkon II, they found it had been partially robbed in antiquity. It was a disappointment, but it didn't deter them. They moved to the next tomb, belonging to a pharaoh named Psusenes I. Here, the seals were intact. As they entered the granite burial chamber, they were met with a sight no one had seen in nearly 3,000 years. The air was thick and still. Before them lay a massive stone sarcophagus. Inside that sarcophagus was another, and inside that, the final prize. This was what made the Tanis discovery so unique. When they finally lifted the lid of the innermost coffin, they weren't greeted by the glittering gold. They expected instead the glint of silver, a metal far rarer to the ancient Egyptians. The mummy of Pharaoh Psusenes I was encased in a solid silver coffin, intricately detailed and breathtakingly beautiful. His face was covered by a funerary mask, not of gold like Tutankhamun's, beaten gold leaf over a solid core, inlaid lapis lazuli, black glass for the eyes, black glass for the eyebrows. He would become known as the Silver Pharaoh. Gold was plentiful and divine, but silver was different. No major silver mines in Egypt, so it had to be imported from the Aegean and the Near East. That scarcity could make silver more valuable than gold, the ultimate display of wealth and international power. In an adjacent chamber, the burial of Shoshenq II, a falcon-headed silver coffin, and a mask of pure gold. While the royal tombs were the most spectacular discovery, they were only one part of Tanis's story. The city was a monumental statement of power, dominated by the great temple of Amun, a northern counterpart to Karnak. Walking the ruins today, you face epic destruction and faint traces of former glory. Giant granite blocks, some weighing dozens of tons, lie scattered like pebbles. Pylons, gateways, sanctuary walls, broken remnants of a once massive temple. The temple area is a jumbled puzzle of history. A colossal statue of Rameses the Great bears a later inscription by Susenes I. Pairs of obelisks, monolithic granite spires, carved centuries apart, yet erected together to enforce symmetry. Layers of history literally stacked on top of each other. Beyond the enclosure, a sacred lake, the Temple of Mut, the Temple of Khonsu, mud brick houses, workshops, administrative buildings. It was a living city. The sheer number of sphinxes, statues, and obelisks was staggering. More than 20 obelisks have been identified at Tanis, more than at any site except Karnak. But the delta's environment is brutal. A high water table and salty soil dissolve mud brick and crack and crumble stone. Archaeologists race to uncover and preserve before the city decays completely. Comparing Tanis to Thebes is like comparing two different hearts beating at different times. Thebes, known today as Luxor, was the capital of the glorious New Kingdom. It was a city of epic scale, built on a solid foundation of rock and confidence. Karnak Temple, Luxor Temple, the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. These monuments were designed to last for eternity, projecting unshakable power and divine order. Thebes was the product of a unified, expansionist Egypt at the peak of its imperial might, a city that looked inward to its own traditions and gods. Tanis, on the other hand, was born out of crisis and division. It was a capital for a more pragmatic, perhaps more precarious age. Its location in the delta made it outward-looking, a hub for trade, diplomacy, defense against foreign threats. While Thebes was built from scratch with newly quarried stone, Tanis was, in large part, a recycled city. This tells you a lot. They were resourceful and respected the past, but they were also in a hurry. They needed to establish their legitimacy quickly, and co-opting famous monuments was the most effective path. In Thebes, pharaohs were buried in deep, rock-cut tombs, hidden away. In Tanis, the pharaohs were buried within the temple enclosure, a radical departure, likely for security in a flat, vulnerable landscape. The safest place was inside sacred walls, protected by enclosure and the watchful eyes of gods and priests. It's not a lesser version of Thebes. It's a clever adaptation to a new environment and political challenges. Even after decades of excavation, Tanis holds on to its secrets with a firm grip. One of the biggest and most confusing mysteries is the case of the tomb squatters. Monte excavated the necropolis and found a bizarre mix of burials. In the antechamber of Susenes I, he found the sarcophagus and mummy of King Amenemope. In the tomb of Osorkon II, he found the burial of his father Takalot I. Most famously, the magnificent burial of King Shoshenq II was found crammed into a small side chamber of Susenes I. It's like finding that a king of England was buried in a closet in Westminster Abbey. Why were these pharaohs buried in other kings' tombs? One theory, for security as robbery threats grew. Another, chaos and floods damaged original tombs, forcing hasty salvage into the safest vault. We simply don't have the final answer. The jumbled necropolis remains a huge puzzle. Another lingering question is the true extent of the city. Beyond the central temple, what about palaces, barracks, shipyards, and residential districts? With thick silt and a high water table, excavation is difficult. Ground-penetrating radar reveals tantalizing hints, but the full layout is still unknown. So, what is the ultimate takeaway from Tanis? Why does a pile of broken stones and a handful of tombs in a muddy field matter so much today? It matters because every lost city we rediscover is like finding a new page from the autobiography of humanity. Tanis reminds us that history is not a neat, linear story. It's messy, complicated, and full of forgotten chapters. For centuries, we relied on the South. The discovery of Tanis provided the missing half, a vibrant, wealthy, resilient northern kingdom we barely knew existed. It shows how even mighty capitals can be reclaimed by nature. The pharaohs of Tanis commanded immense power, but they couldn't command the river. The slow, relentless silting was an enemy they couldn't fight. A humbling reminder for our own cities and monuments. Exploration fuels wonder. Montate's years in obscurity before his incredible find inspire us to keep looking, keep questioning, and challenge conventional wisdom. The treasures of Susenes I, the recycled obelisks of Ramesses, more than museum pieces. Echoes of people who lived, dreamed, ruled, and died. The sands of the Nile Delta may have buried Tanis, but they couldn't extinguish its voice. And as long as we are willing to listen, this lost city will continue to tell its incredible tale. Every new excavation season brings the hope that another sealed doorway will be found, leading to another pharaoh and another chapter. Tanis isn't done talking yet. To the forgotten capital, the secrets of Tanis, still rising from sand and silt,